The main argument for me that Scott McCloud produces in his argument about the specificity of the medium is his theorizing of the gap. So his argument is that how do comics in a way perform the function of time? And his claim is that the function of time in comics is produced by the gap, or what is called the gutter, the space between panels. His argument is that there is an inherent kind of a reader collaboration when you look at comics, because it's the reader that fulfills or closes the gap that exists between two panels. So the imaginative leap that you make between one panel to the other is really the act of, in a way, the reader producing meaning out of that particular comic. And that, of course, can be manipulated in very, very different ways. I mean, just to give you one example of this, this is the classic one that we all know, right? I mean, the iconic kind of thing. But if you look at the way that the gap functions, of course, these are a series of montages. They're not kind of, necessarily sequential in the way that they're linear, but that gap is filled very easily. This is the recognizable one. But if you look at another one, this is Sean Tan, The Arrival. Absolutely brilliant comic. But you look at the way that he works it, and it's not even as close in terms of the linearity of, let's say, the Batman. The Batman one, you know, they go for a movie, they come out, the movie was Mask of Zorro, they come out, parents are dead, he's become an orphan, and then he becomes Batman. You know that story. But when you look at the Arrival and look at the way that the kind of, the gap functions, for one, you're not entirely sure how to navigate the space. The conventional way of navigating the space, which is from the top left moving down, in that kind of way to the right bottom, is something that has now completely been challenged by a whole range of people. So in Sean Tan, you will see that movement happens, and then finally there is this kind of, for lack of a better word, the zooming out that takes place. The third argument that Scott McCloud makes about the uniqueness of comics is really about their temporality. And this there's a whole bunch of other things that I'm going to skip for time, which is that in thinking about the movement between panels, how do you think about choice of moment, choice of frame, etc. I'm not going to go into all of that. But if you take this single image that Scott McCloud uses, he says this is a very complicated image for the simple reason that while the act of reading it sequentially makes you read it from smile to, sure you want to move that there, Jed, right? But is there a linearity in this moment? In other words, is this happening sequentially in terms of time? Or could it be the case that the chess game or the checkers game is actually happening before the moment when someone takes that camera? What about the middle? Are they talking about the moment before or the moment after? The idea of the smile, etc. So one of the unique things about comics that Scott McCloud claims is that because of the fact of the temporal unfolding of time in a spatial manner allows you a wide range of choices in the ways that you can actually play with how the reader perceives and experience the experience of time and space. He says if you were to illustrate this in terms of an image, this is what happens in comics. That there is this kind of entanglement that is possible. And one of the ways of disciplining this is, of course, by the gutter. If you just put a gutter in the same image, you suddenly have a sequential moment that unfolds in a very, very kind of clear way. Very quick example of a single story and how you can have different examples or perspectives on this. This is Matt Madden's 99 Ways to Tell a Story. This is the frame story. Man is working on a computer, he gets up, he goes down, someone says, what time is it? He says, 1:15, thanks, and he goes to the fridge and says, what the hell was I looking for anyway? Now, look at the ways in which you can actually play around the perspective on this. So this one becomes, for example, a subjective point of view account of the same story. But you see immediately that the choice then of the paneling, the choice of the gutter changes. This one becomes an externalized third-person point of view of the same event. Someone looking at it from outside. This is the manga style with the mandatory, teeny girls, panties, etc. This is a single panel. All of the information that was contained in the first narrative is all here, but in a single moment, right? And this is the collapsing in a way of time. This is one which, and I'll come when I talk about Chris Ware's work, I'll talk about it a lot more, where it's really, really dense in terms of the kind of visual information that you have. There are no gutters, it's almost as though we're flowing into each other. But what do you think about here in terms of the unfolding of time? Because this really becomes about that single moment that really stretches. In other words, it slows down time, right? This one, of course, through the use of the vertical kind of panels and the very narrow butter between the two really kind of creates this into a kind of an experience of anxiety